Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Jerry Dreyer or Gerald Dreyer. I'm a career educator. I've had a bunch of different hats. I've been an outdoor educator. I've been a classroom educator. Currently, I'm a student studying education. I'm a graduate student at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I'm deeply interested in technology and personalization and personalized learning. And I've developed a tool that can inform our practices about it. And I'll talk about that a lot and talk about personalization. But also here to just hear what you all have to say and what your questions are and what kind of things you're facing in your practice right now. So maybe we could just go around and introduce ourselves. Sean, do you want to go ahead and talk about yourself a little bit?
Sure. I'm a teacher at WAVE, stands for Washtenaw Alliance for Virtual Education. We've been associated with Teacher Power, 4.5, maybe 5 years ish. Sarah Giddings kind of brought it to us. I've been teaching apparently for 30 years. The last 10 in this environment, and the last since we went home, COVID, the March, 2.5 years ago, whatever it is, I've been pretty much online, about 95%. I've gotten into lab 2 or 3 times, once for our graduation, but so I've been doing a lot of experimentation with what it looks like to do a Zoom class or lots and lots of Google Jamboard and stuff like that.
Nice. And if you guys want, this is a good chance to try out the tools. You can slap a little Post-it note on this slide here that says introductions. There's Post-it notes at the top, and you can put your stuff on there if you like. Go ahead, Julie. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi there, I'm Julie Cook from Pennsylvania, Satterton Charter School Collaborative. We're a K-8 school just outside of Philadelphia, and I'm also part of the Teacher Powered Network. I'm really happy to be here and learn about this survey, always looking for alternate ways to highlight our school and dig into ways to make it better.
Nice, thanks, Julie. How about Alex? We're just introducing ourselves. You could just say your name and why you're here.
Happy to. I am on the Teacher Powered team with Amy, and I am super excited to learn all about this. It's a really, it looks like a wonderful tool to use with teams, so I'm thrilled.
Nice, thanks.
Former teacher, not in the classroom anymore.
Yeah, great. Aziz, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jerry. So hello, everyone. My name is Aziz Awaludin. So I'm in a room with others, so I use Max now. And I'm originally from Indonesia, and this is my first year here at UW Medicine. I'm working also with Jerry on a certain project, and yeah, I'm looking forward to learning about this call PL. I just took the survey sample this morning, so I'm really excited to learn more about the personalized learning. Okay, nice to meet you all.
Hi, Peter. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, Jerry, we do go way back when to Goddard,
Okay.
and then seen each other several times at ISN. And so when Amy said you were presenting, I was excited because I've seen some of the other work you had been talking about. So thank you for presenting for this. I currently serve as the director and one of the teachers at Northwest Passage High School in Coon Rapids, Minnesota. We're a project-based and experiential learning high school, and I'm also on the mentor team for Teacher Powered Network.
Nice. Great. Great to see you again, Peter.
Yeah.
Amy, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? I think everybody knows you probably, but go ahead.
But no, maybe not everyone. I'm Amy Youngie. I'm the director of Teacher Powered Schools, and we are always looking for ways to support our teams in their student ownership and agency piece. And I love the information and data that this survey will be able to give teams. And so I'm excited to have a chance to share that with our network. Thank you for being here tonight, Jerry.
You bet. Thanks, Amy. All right, I'm going across the bottom of my screen, and I don't think your name is this, but maybe it is. Abercob. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Ann Brackup, and I work at Jane Goodall Environmental Sciences Academy out in Maple Lake, Minnesota. You know, a real small school, and I work as a special ed teacher, and I'm just a huge fan of the teacher-powered method of school governance. And anything you guys do, I am a part of. I love to see it and participate in it.
Thanks, that's great. How about Sarah? Do you want to do a quick introduction?
Sure. Hi. Sorry, I'm not putting my video on tonight because I got a double whammy of a COVID booster and a flu vaccine, and that was probably not a great thought. So I've been a little under the weather today, but I work with Sean at WAVE, which is an alternative high school in Michigan. We do a lot of alternative things, and I was really interested in the premise of this survey and looking forward to hearing more.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And Skylar, want to say hi and say why you're here, maybe?
Yes, hello. Sorry I was a little bit late joining. I'm Skylar Prim. I am co-lead teacher at Highmark Environmental Charter School in Montello, Wisconsin. We're a small place and project-based school, and we're always looking for alternative ways to assess our kids, especially in a world where we're kind of pushed into standardized boxes by our district a lot. And so I was excited by this idea to learn a little bit more. And I'm also the leader of the Wisconsin Teacher Powered Schools Network. So I'm glad to be here.
Nice, great. Well, thanks everyone. I want to thank you just for taking your time out on a busy night and after a long day of working. And my goal is to try to, there's a lot of things I can talk about and we can discuss and do together that will take way more than the remaining 50 minutes that we have left. So I just want to make sure that we use the time so it suits you what you need and what benefits you the most. And hopefully the technology tools will help us to do that a little bit. Have people been able to get onto the whiteboard that I shared? And I'm going to put that in the chat again, just because some people got here maybe a little bit late, or it doesn't come up in the chat if you get to hear it afterwards.
Jerry, I can access it, but I couldn't figure out how to like get into each section or where we were supposed to be.
Yeah. So that's my next question is, hopefully you are seeing the slides move around as I manipulate them. So are you seeing the slide that says introductions now? Does that kind of pull up for everybody? You can wander away from it, but then hopefully it'll suck you back in when I advance to the next section. Does that make sense? Okay. If it's not working or if you're confused as to what's going on, I'll share my screen and then you will kind of all be in the same place visually then, but I kind of prefer to see everybody's faces and kind of work on a separate tab or window with the visuals, if that makes sense to people. And if you're having troubles, just jump in and shout and say, this does not work for me. Great, and I see people posting stuff on there. So I'm gonna jump ahead to the next. Go ahead.
How are people like getting a Post-it note?
You should see a little toolbar up at the top, Alex, and there should be some a little square up there with a Post-it note available on it, and like a pen tool and maybe a comment tool. Do you see those?
No, but those sound useful.
You might try refreshing.
If others see it, I don't need to stop the progress. Others seem to have figured this out, so we're good.
All right. Keep playing with it.
I'll make one of you show me at some point because it sounds great.
Okay. So now we're on this goals slide, and I just want to ask what your questions are about personalization. So this will be a good chance to practice with the Post-its. You can grab a Post-it and put your questions down. And is it a why question? Like, why should we personalize? Put that on the left column. So this is your left. And if it's a how do we personalize question, put it on the right column, which is this side to you all. And just kind of pop those in there. And we'll just spend like 1 or 2 minutes doing that, and then we'll just kind of popcorn them out anyway and talk. But this just gives us a little visual. There we go. I see people moving their Post-it notes. Nice. And then you can click on it and you can just type right on it. There we go. Great. Good questions already. Alex, did you find a Post-it now, or do you need someone to do it for you?
I just figured it out. It looks like I need to maximize my screen. So I can't look, I can't.
Oh.
That's okay. If I maximize, I will just hear your voices and be looking.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we don't want the technology to get in the way. So how do we personalize learning when some students would rather opt out? That's a great how question. How do we personalize while considering what seems to be growing anxiety among students? Yeah, and personalization can definitely be anxiety inducing, right? Because when there's not personalization, students don't really have to make too many choices. And when we start giving them choices, that can be anxiety producing. And Peter and I both went to this really unique school out in Vermont, was very project-based and very personalized. And every student there, I think, just freaks out at a certain point. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, because you're doing everything. How do we communicate our personalization to families? Right, especially they have not typically experienced this. They're used to the 3 R's or 4 R's or whatever. How do we include personalized learning and make that transparent to parents, next schools, the state? Yeah, how do we interface all this with other people? And then why? How does it serve students? Why don't we do personalized education? Yeah. Why do schools need it? Yeah, these are all super great questions. Any other things to just pop out? Looks like a couple of people are still writing a little bit, but any other things that pop out that people just want to say right now?
I didn't put this on there because it was kind of a lengthier thought, but how do you balance the tension between like a student who would prefer that every topic, everything is completely personal, and meet them with, but yet there's some things that you don't know about that I want you to know about. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. It's not all of the answers are in Minecraft.
Right. Or like, yeah. Or like my
bubble. A lot of them are, but not all of them. Yeah. Or my bubble is,
I would prefer that everything be connected to my community instead of learning about other cultures or other countries or other places. That was a longer one, which is why I didn't put it there.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Okay, so I think what I'll try to do is I'll try to talk a little bit about kind of this model that we've developed, that I've led this team in developing. So there's lots of models of personalization out there. If you look at most of them, they talk about conditions, like these are the conditions that need to exist for personalization. What we've tried to do is describe a model that, like, this is what the teacher does, which is a little bit counterintuitive because we think of personalization as the student having a lot of agency and choice and doing a lot of kind of the cognitive work in some sense. But for that to happen, the teacher actually has to do things. And so we kind of came up with these kind of 8 things that we think teachers should do. I'll just try to talk about that pretty briefly. And and then I'll tell you about this kind of evaluation or reflective tool or professional development tool that we've developed that kind of goes with that, it attempts to measure to what degree those practices are being done in your classroom. And there's reasons for doing that. And then maybe we'll have a little bit of time also to jump into a little bit of the whys of personalization, like what are some of the problems it can solve? And hopefully we can do a little bit of just really quick brainstorming, like design activity. Like we can just take a practice from our list of practices, and then you can try to apply it to a problem that exists in your school or your classroom. You know, and try to think, how would I use this to solve this problem? So I think we'll just try to kind of wander through those on a little bit of an adventure, and then people just dig in where you want to dig in. And if it's not working, then, and I can see your eyes glazing over, you know, or maybe you just give me a thumbs down or something, we'll just move to the next thing as quickly as possible. Does that make sense? Is that helpful to people? Does that sound okay? Okay. So just a little bit about personalization. So we're all familiar with this traditional model of schooling where we just kind of measure people and sort them out. That's what American schools did extremely well for about 100 years. Just sorted people. You're going to be middle class. You're going to be working class. We'll give you a shot at being one of the elite. That's kind of how schools went. Then we get into this accountability regime that we've had under like No Child Left Behind. This is where we say, okay, now we're going to measure the instruction. We think that's what actually matters. And so we're just going to put all this accountability on what type of instruction people are getting. Okay. Personalization comes at it from the whole other end. Personalization says, actually, let's adapt the whole system based on the learner, who the learner already is, and the characteristics that they bring with them. So that can be academic ability, it can be their interests, their culture, their background, all kinds of things, right? And really, we visualize personalization as a design process. So it's really designing instruction around these individual characteristics. Make sense so far? This shouldn't be too gigantically new to anybody, but if it is, let me know. So if you read the literature on personalization, they generally, everybody kind of breaks it into 4 buckets, and they call the buckets different things. Usually they call this one up here, they call relationships, they usually call it profiles. But I call it relationships. There's flexible learning pathways, there's some sort of assessment, and there's some sort of flexibility built into the environment. And so we've kind of split those up and said, these are the key practices. So within relationships, we meet with learners regularly and talk to them. And we build a relationship and we gather a lot of data about them. We keep that data and that knowledge about students in these learner profiles. These flexible pathways are built around student choice, and they group students not just around a bell schedule, not just around needs, but also around interests. And we assess them using competency-based progressions and authentic assessments. And the learning environments are both physical and cultural, and that's also all the digital media and technology we use to kind of support all of this. So you can read all this text and dig into this more. And there's actually documents linked off of here that give a lot more. And I'm not going to go into that whole thing right now in each one in detail. But all of these kind of work together. We start with building a relationship with students. And then from there, that tells us what types of assessments we can do and what types of instruction we can do. And those kind of talk back and forth to give us more information about students. And then supporting all of this is the digital media and the learning spaces. Does that sort of make sense to people, how that might look? Okay. So really what this does, and there was a lot of questions about this earlier, is it kind of places personalized learning kind of in the center of this space where it's kind of a mediating set of practices that mediate between schools and the demands of schools. Like schools want accountability, they want our kids to matriculate and go on to higher ed or get jobs or be citizens, family members, things like that. Then there's our students, who they are, who they come to us as, all the wealth of characteristics that they have. And then there's like this technology that's out there. And so personalized learning kind of lives in this space of personalization. If you think about the way we all learn, most of us are in some kind of interest groups online, for example, like people here are in Facebook groups or Reddit groups and stuff. And I'm really into bicycle racing, and I'm on a team, and I do it with people, and I race, and you're evaluated on how you place. And I spend lots of money on it and lots of time. This is something I do, and I've gotten fairly good at. You all have something like that too, and multiple things, right? And all of our students do as well. And pretty much people do this all the time, as much as they can. And the only place it doesn't seem to happen is actually in schools. So personalization is kind of about like taking that sort of real naturalistic learning that's really well proven by the learning sciences and saying, how do we make that work in a classroom situation that is trying to tie these things to accountability and stuff. And there's a bunch of tools and tricks in there, you know, like competency-based assessments, for example, right? Okay. You would not need to put me in a high school gym class. Like I've already got all that because I'm on a bike racing team, right? Some of you do not need to take biology because you are expert gardeners. Like you know how these things work on a deep level. So personalization tries to get at some of that. Questions, comments, concerns at this point? Or where should we go next? Let me just talk real briefly about how personalization kind of can be a really disruptive tool, and so in a positive way, right? So how many of your schools are working on equity right now? Right, like show of hands, right? Like everybody is. It's in everybody's mission statement right now. And often what that looks like is equity is seen as access, right? Like we need more of something, or somehow we're just better at teaching, it'll be more equitable. Well, when we look deeply into the structures of the routines that happen in classrooms, that's where the inequity is happening, right? Like the actual mechanisms of teaching, of assessment, of many of the systems of schools, that's actually what is marginalizing the students. So how do we change those systems? Well, personalization offers a lot of ways to do both of those. Okay, so it redesigns things. So you can think about schools as doing things kind of without students in mind at all. That's standardization that we heard about before. Sometimes we're doing stuff to students. That's when we differentiate, which is we're attempting to meet their needs, but the adults in the room are still making all the decisions. Then we go to individualization, which is what a lot of schools are asked to do. This is where we're really trying to design individually. Super great idea, super not practical, because teachers just don't have the bandwidth or the cognitive bandwidth to do this. It's just impossible, right? Personalization shifts that because personalization puts that cognitive load on the students. Like, let's have the students do a lot of this sorting and figuring things out. One, they'll probably make better decisions. And two, we don't have to make those decisions now. It shifts the role of the teacher, right? And this does a lot of things to disrupt a lot of the systems of inequity that are in there. I want some pushback right now. I want pushback from who asked the question about how do I shift kids off of always being on Minecraft or always being in their bubble. Who asked that question? Was that Sarah?
Yes, sorry, it's toggling between this, the board while you're doing it and then back to Zoom is causing the delay.
No problems.
Yeah, that was me.
No problems. So you want to push back on this idea a little bit?
Well, yes. I don't know if I necessarily want to push back on it. It's just how far do you go with it? Because I don't think it's necessarily an either or. It's more of a to what degree. And I think, and this probably comes from the background of right now being a social studies teacher and seeing certain segments of our population want to ignore history that's uncomfortable or things that we, you know, that they don't want to talk about. I I think that's a tension with doing this, because a lot of students would prefer to ignore some of the history that they're uncomfortable with.
Right. Yeah, right. Or parents would have us ignore that or whatever, right? Or how do you, or just speaking strictly in Vygotskian terms, how do we get people out of their comfort zone and into their growth zone without pushing them into their panic zone? Yeah. What do other people think about this idea or have some comments? Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
So for me, personalization, actually all three of those, personalization, individualization, or differentiation, all sort of operate on the assumption that our students care. And maybe I'm coming from, alternative school perspective, but all too often when WAVE has done this for about 10 years, offer this sort of student-driven option, our kids care to the extent that they can talk about Minecraft or bike racing or whatever, but as soon as it turns the corner to try to become credit or credit worthy, they're out. They opt out. And so I guess one of my pushbacks would be just that specifically. Students have to want to do those things, I think, in order for us to get there. And I realize it's kind of a, chicken and the egg thing, but.
I think that's a very important point. At the school that I worked at for many years, it was primarily an alternative school. We kind of got the fire lit under us about this idea, and we came in one September and said, all right, project-based all the time, personalized all the time, go. And a third of the kids literally walked out of the building, because it's harder. They wanted to mail it in. And we were like, yeah, there's no D minuses anymore. And they just, boop. A lot of them eventually came back. They were like, oh, but at first they were like, whoa. Over time, one thing we found is that about a third of our students, we were actively holding them back. Like when we gave them more rein, they just took off. Like you wouldn't believe how fast they were going. And so that was a real wake-up call. That was like, wow, our best efforts were harming a third of our kids, at least. And one thing that happened is once those third kind of figured out how to do it and get going, is that then we had all this extra time. Like magically, I had 30% more time in my day. Like when does that happen to a teacher? A lot of our special ed kids really struggled because they wanted certainty and they wanted a lot more scaffolding. But now I had, guess what, more time. And so we didn't nail all this stuff right away, that's for sure. But over time, you can tailor it to your community. And our population changed constantly, and we would redesign our day about every 4 weeks. We'd redesign our whole day, and just based on what the current needs were. So I would say that
Jerry, can I just add something real quick in there? I think a lot of the folks on this group are working in primarily high schools and primarily with students who are, considered at risk or behind their things. And I think what we've discovered and wish we had more control over is a model like this that starts earlier, I think gets a lot more return on investment than when we get our 11th, 12 plus graders who are, just interested in earning credit and getting out and don't want to put in the extra time and the work and not have to invest in all of the relearning that a model like this takes. So I think that's important to kind of think about, when do you start this, and how early can you do it, and what would be the return on investment if you did that?
Yeah, that's a great question. A great model is Valley New School. I don't know if people here are familiar. It's a 7-12 school. And if you talk to them, they talk about the Sigma wave with their students coming in. They're like, our 7th graders go backwards, is what they say. Like our 7th graders regress. And the school is okay with that. You know, they don't stick to a timetable so much. They're like, well, it just takes them a while to figure out how we do things here. And that's their job right now. They're not meeting standards, but they are figuring out how to do valeting in the school. And then that production ramps up. Clark Street in Middleton is similar. I think I don't know if they're 1012 or 912. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's fun to talk to seniors there, because the seniors have like this crazed look in their eyes. They're like, I got to do this and this and this and this. And it's not, I empathize with you entirely, Sean, about like when you have students who are not bought in. But I think when this model is really successful, the students do that for you. And so at some of these schools, you talk to the seniors and they're like, yep, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And they can take that on.
I was just going to add that
go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted
go
to,
ahead, yeah.
if you don't mind. Yeah, I just, so our school is 612, and we were 712 up until last year. We added 6th grade because our district just switched how they defined middle school. And so we just followed along. And I would say that we really have found those 6th graders have like really raised the bar for our other students, just because they have so much like less to unlearn coming in terms of like they're coming straight from the elementary school and the like wide open spaces of their 5th grade classroom into personalized, like, oh, I could do whatever I am interested in. This is amazing. I'm going to push. And it's been really good for, I think, the attitudes of all the ages of students, because they see that kind of injection of, I don't know, youthful energy from those younger kids. And I'm really excited to see what those kids do when they're seniors in, 5 or 6 years.
I really like that word, unlearning, because that's I mean, our students have learned how to comply with school, and many of our schools students have learned that D- or to mail it in, or it's not intellectually rigorous for them, and we're asking them to be very much more intellectually rigorous than they've been in the past, and that can be a threat for sure, and I think we have to look at that carefully. And I think the way that we onboard students or bootstrap students or whatever you want to call it, that's a really important task. And notice what a change in the teacher role that is, right? And and we haven't been prepared for that as teachers. And some of the teachers on our staff are not ready for that, or not even skilled at that. And we have to examine that, I think is really important. It's different. Content delivery is kind of gone, right? And it's about coaching and helping students design curriculum and building relationships and all this important stuff. And I know you're all experts at this. You're nodding your heads like, oh yeah, that's what I do all day. So if we look at like using competency-based progressions, I think this is one thing that the school that I worked at did successfully, and I've seen other schools do pretty well. And so combining this with authentic assessments. So it's like when it's authentic, when it's meaningful to the student and has value outside of the school. The competency part is checking the boxes. So yeah, the district needs them to check these boxes to get a diploma, because we got to get these Carnegie units in. But the student is more motivated by stuff that has value outside of that, right? They don't really care about those boxes. They care more about their community and stuff. So ideally, we got assessments that are kind of hitting both of these at the same time. This is where a lot of the creative work comes in. And I think this is a key area, and this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of interfacing the student interest and the needs of the district. There's a lot of great resources out there, a lot of project-based stories about this. Typically, that's what it's looking like. Okay, we've got about 25 minutes left. Do we want to keep digging into these practices? Do we want to try a design activity? Do you want to hear about the survey? So what's a good way to get everybody's sense of this? you could shout it out, or maybe we'll just put it in the chat. So
I think
learn
people
about,
definitely probably want to hear about this survey at some point. So however you want to do that time, just as long as there's time to talk about that and what it's measuring and how people would use it
okay,
with their teams.
looks like people are interested in that. Okay, so here's the choices, and just go ahead and pop in. Okay, survey. Okay, great, good. Okay, so so there's these 8 key practices that we've kind of identified, and we've done this by looking at a lot of schools, talking to a lot of people, tying this back to the learning sciences, tying this back to other pedagogies like connected learning and participatory culture and project-based learning. So if you kind of look at all of these things and think about the traditional needs of schools, we've kind of come up with, we think these are the 8 things that really matter. And I showed you that list. So the key then is how do we know that we're doing them, right? And how do we evaluate that? So, whoops, that's not the right. Okay, so so how do you know you're doing it? So we've designed this survey that asks between like 4 and 8 questions in each of those areas. And then the scale that it's kind of mapping people on is what we've kind of been talking around a lot, but we haven't really named yet, which is student agency. So how much control and choice do students have in the classroom? So you can be in a traditional classroom where there's 0 choice. You can still receive excellent instruction. You can have a great teacher. You can be really academically successful. It's not about quality of school. It's just about how much agency the student has. Or you can be in a classroom that's like super completely student driven. For example, Valley New School. It's almost 100% student driven. Or you can be somewhere in the middle. Or this might vary at different times of the day, different subject areas, different grades, different times in your life, whatever. So what we want to know is, what are teachers doing in terms of these practices? And there's a couple reasons to know that. Actually, I should go to this other slides here. So there's different reasons for knowing this. So one is just from a research perspective. So like here at the university, we just kind of want to know, what are you all guys all doing in your classrooms? We want to know, how's that working? The other reason to know is that teachers can know too. So you can take the survey, you get these results back, and it kind of maps out where you are on that scale across the practices. So am I really strong at conferring? Am I not so strong at assessment? You probably have a gut sense, but this can kind of tell you a little bit more concretely. And then for at a district or a school level, I think this identifies what's kind of going on in the whole ecosystem. So are some classrooms stronger in some areas than others? Are there systemic weaknesses in the system? So for example, if you look at some of the key practices here, and then you, let's see if this is it's not going to go to the right slide. Anyway, if you look at these things, I'll try to draw it on here. Conferring typically scores very high for many schools, learner profiles. If you average all the schools of people that have taken this, and I'm kind of giving little arrows to show where schools do well or not well.
Can I just ask a clarifying question quick?
Yeah.
The designing learning spaces, what is, can you just maybe put some words to that? Are you talking about physical spaces or meeting spaces and maybe in digital language, or what kind of, what do you see, how do you see that?
The learning space is definitely the physical layout of the room.
Okay.
So if you look at this, digital media, using digital media and designing learning spaces, teachers that identify as personalized learning generally do really high on the survey with that. They do really high with conferring and learning profiles, like they are making strong relationships with kids. With flexible pathways and grouping, it's kind of a mixed bag. With assessment, they tend to do lower. Well, what does there's a story that you can kind of hypothesize that goes with this, is that with those bottom two, the teachers that are doing this have high capacity already. They have skills and freedom in these areas, and they use them. And they're interested in relationships with students. And the school system, be it the board or the district or state level concerns or whatever, have these constraints that keep them from doing certain things, particularly when it comes to assessment. Okay, so this is one type of information that gives you. If you look at individual districts and individual schools, there's going to be a lot of variation in there. And so the purpose of taking the surveys is, one, to inform researchers, two, practitioners, teachers in the classroom get more, they just get formative feedback. And then at a school or a district level, there's data there about what's happening at a school or district level. So you can look at, this classroom is doing better, we're doing better at this grade level, math is less personalized than social studies, or whatever the case may be. So those are kind of some of the purposes. Does that make sense? Hopefully that was not too discombobulated. Okay, it's not like a teacher evaluation system. We're not trying to evaluate teachers and say they're good or bad. We're just saying, how personalized are you? How personalized is your practice? Okay. And we measure that again by just saying how much control or decision making do students have. It's totally confidential. Like individual takers of the survey get an individualized report, and that has it has a breakdown of all the areas. It also has resources and suggested steps for each area that it's based on the research. School leaders get an aggregate report that does not have names on it. So it's not identifiable. So it's not like a retribution tool or whatever. And then researchers, of course, get data too. So that's kind of a slightly non-linear description of the survey. Does that make sense to people? Are there questions about that? What you can do is you can navigate over to this slide, or you can use this bit.ly, and that'll take you to a PDF that's a waiver, and you read the waiver and you click on a link at the bottom, and that'll take you into the survey. It takes about 35 minutes to do it, which is why I didn't want to just do it in this session, because we would just sit there quietly staring at our screens doing it for 35 minutes, which I think is maybe not as useful as this discussion. But if you want to, you can go ahead and take it, and you'll get your reports back. There's a little help file down here at the bottom. If you need some help navigating it, it's not 100% super clean, but it's pretty clean in terms of how you navigate through. And you can get that information and you can try it out. And then if you want to talk about your results or what that means, you can reach out to me. If you think this is a good tool for your team, then reach out to me and we can talk about how to set that up for your team. It's free. We try to customize it to your local needs and the kinds of questions that you're asking yourselves in your professional learning communities, and to try to make that work. So that's kind of a little pitch about the survey and kind of what it looks like and things. Amy just posted in the chat the website link, which actually has a really short demo version that does 8 questions. If you want to blast through that right now, that's
what I was thinking might be helpful. And then I think it's helpful to go through just the demo or the sample survey, just gives people a sense of the questions. But I also think it's helpful if you can walk us through the sample feedback report, because that will allow people to have a sense of, oh, someone's birthday. You're screen sharing, just so you know.
Am I just sharing that screen right now? Okay.
Yes.
That's my daughter blowing out the candles on her cake.
Sweet. Just so people have a sense of what the reports would look like for their team and what kind of data they would be getting.
Yeah. Let me show you that. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Still?
Yes. Now we see the website.
Okay, great. So if you go there, you click on the sample survey, you won't actually get a real report back from that, but you'll see how it works. But this is what a report looks like. So it's pretty cool. You can customize it. You can look across these different tabs. What am I good at? What do I need to get better at? You can sort it by domain, top and bottom 10. So for example, in this fake data set, my rating is a number, which I hate, but 3.67. But if you think about that on a scale of 1 to 4, that's fairly personalized. My school, however, maybe not so much. So maybe I'm a leader in the school in terms of using learner profiles. We think that's useful data right there, right? Because you can think about it kind of like a dating service in a way. Like, I'm pretty good at using learner profiles. Somebody else in my school maybe isn't. Maybe that's a good opportunity for us to pair up, or we can have a conversation about that.
Gary, I have a question.
Yeah.
So if the school is taking it all at the same time, the school rating wouldn't get, the school rating wouldn't be there. Is that correct?
It'll come through right away, but it'll be like the first person that takes it will be a little wonky. The second person will be a little wonky. By the time you're all in there, it'll balance out. You just got to run your report again, if that makes sense. If you take it together in a meeting and then you wait 15 minutes and then run your report. Boom.
Got it.
Some things that we like about this are more so than just getting a number back. Is like, here's our strengths, and we can drill down and look at individual questions and see where that's going. We can look at links to resources in here as well. And let me try to find that for you. Strategies and suggestions. Oh, it's not showing up in this one. That's lame. Okay. Normally, if you click here, it'll actually spit out this giant web page with like 10 steps, like a progression of steps to do in that area. And you can pretty easily identify where you fit on that continuum. And our suggestion is just take the next step, right? Like, I've done these first 4 already. Oh, we'll do 5 then. And then we have tons of resources in there. So the idea is to, another feature of it is that we hope that it adds value for teachers and leaders, because you don't have to necessarily figure this stuff out on your own. You can kind of get a snapshot. Here's where we are. Okay, what do we do next? Okay, here's the resources. If that makes sense. Okay, I'm actually starting to lose my voice now because I'm not in my classroom all the time anymore. So I've kind of lost that skill that you all still possess, I'm sure. Questions, comments, concerns, ideas at this point?
I'm curious, how many people took the sample survey questions, those 8 questions that did anyone click through those? And anyone pull up the sample data?
Yeah, this one's just on. Yeah, Julie? Oh, you're waving to somebody walking through your house. Sometimes people are petting cats or, whatever.
I think there's a question in the chat box. Sean says he'd be interested in more information about the creative assessment, if there was any.
It was.
Can you say more about that, Sean?
Yeah, it was kind of a reorganization of your terms, but you were talking about how one of the tricks to effectively using personalized learning was to get creative with assessment. So I renamed it and called it creative assessment. And the idea for me feels brilliant. All of a sudden, I'm really excited about school again. If we are being creative in our assessment and not just, working toward a grade and stuff like that. So if there are other links or other schools that you see that are successfully navigating this that'd be great. I'd love to see some ideas about how people are doing that.
Does anyone have a success story they want to share in this area? I have one, but I want to give everyone else a chance to share. So I just posted in the chat, this is at the school I use at Prairie Phoenix Academy. I bet many of you have something pretty similar to this. We just had a Google sheet. It's ugly because it's a Google sheet. It's not made by professionals. It's just made by teachers. But the good news is it's Google sheet, so you can make it yourself for free and you can adapt it the way however you want. And so we went through, and so we had seniors and they need 25 credits. And if you go on a quarterly system, that's 100 quarter credits. And we just broke those down into literally there's 100 boxes on this spreadsheet, distributed across the different areas. And so basically it was, if you look at English 9, quarter 1, narrative storytelling, well, the student needs to just turn in some artifact that meets that requirement. That could be almost anything, right? Narrative storytelling. It could be their Twitter feed. I mean, right? So, and they might be able to knock out that that requirement, and with one single artifact might branch across multiple standards. They might need 2 or 3 artifacts. It just depends entirely on what they're doing, right? So I think this is when we start at the standards and just kind of work backwards that way, we're just kind of go, what are all the things we need to do? And then people just start, when your students just start basically spitballing ideas, and then you try to plug them in and try to match them on here. That's where the creativity comes in that I hear you talking about, Sean. You know, and to me, this is where the marriage between an authentic assessment and a competency-based assessment happens, right? So you could just literally just put in a hyperlink in this box to something the student made. They made a music video. Well, that's actually narrative storytelling. It's also a bunch of other things too. So we can check a bunch of boxes with that project. That's one approach. I think other people use different approaches too.
I think it's interesting because as you're saying it, it is feeling like something that we've been doing, and I think one of the beauties of coming to the teacher powered events is I'm reminded that we hear people say things that remind us what we're doing, right? That kind of gets us sort of out of we're alone here in Michigan. We don't feel like we've got a whole big team to get together and talk with. But we do, so Sarah and I teach a class together called Global Issues, and we give both English credit and world history credit for that class. And it is a synchronous class being held right now in Zoom. And so Sarah and I do just a variety of things. We do a little bit of geography. We draw a map of the world. We do sticky notes on Jamboards and a lot of these things. And I guess, indeed, we are doing some creative assessment there, right? Like we're really kind of on the edge of how we're evaluating our students in that way. And I think we just forget about what we're doing because we've been doing it.
Yeah. So I think it's real important to get out and talk to people. And then I think it's also really important to, so there's a big commotion in the hallway right here. Also be having these conversations in our own working teams, right? And I find it really useful to have them about actual data. So when we can look at, if we could pull up a bunch of grad plans like that for students and look at those and kind of say, what do we need to do next? Like that's the process that my school underwent when we would redesign the daily schedule every 4 weeks, is we would look at all those grad plans and go, what needs to happen next? Okay, let's make our days a little more math oriented. Students have a lot of choices, but more of the choices are about math now. Or let's make the days a little bit more about this. You know, the students still have lots of choices, but more of them are about this. You know, we're sort of nudging them in certain directions. So that's really, you know, getting back to that whole design process, right? So human-centered design. I feel like we're sort of kind of bumping up against the edge here. So any final thoughts or comments are super welcome right now, and you can put them in the chat or just shout them out right now. If you're interested in using this evaluative tool, or you just want to talk about it, talk about personalization or whatever, I'm always available. This is what I do for a living right now as a graduate student, so I'm super happy to talk your ear off or listen your ear off either way.
Thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, if you decide to use this with your team, if you'd let us know, because I'd love to get the teams together that are using it, and then you can have like a little cohort experience and share your own learning amongst your team. I think that would be really valuable. So we will share this video widely in our network for people who weren't able to make it tonight. And we really appreciate all of your time. Thank you for being with us on a Monday night after a long day. And especially thank you to Jerry for creating this amazing tool and for sharing it with us. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.